You know when grown-ups tell you everything's going to be fine, and you think they're probably lying to make you feel better?
Yeah.
Everything's going to be fine.
For its fifth series, the post-2005 version of Doctor Who was about to drop a new Doctor on us, the 11th Doctor, known to some as 11, and to others he just looked 11. We also had a new showrunner, new companions, and now the editors had to make sure they ticked the box that said 1080.
Hello. I'm the Doctor.
Doctor Who Series 5.
You never interfere in the affairs of other peoples or planets, unless there's children crying.
Doctor Who came back, did well, changed Doctors, did really well. Now it was time for not only the Doctor to change, but also the show's head writer. While David Tennant and Russell T Davies were working on the 10th Doctor's victory lap in a number of specials throughout 2009, Steven Moffat was getting his team and his scripts together for his first year overseeing the series.
What are you gonna do?
What I always do, stay out of trouble.
Series 5 would premiere on BBC One in April of 2010, bringing with it an overall sense of renewal and change. Watching these episodes again takes me back to what I was doing in 2010. Actually, I have absolutely no idea what I was doing in 2010. The tone of the show's scripts would change with the new production team, where alongside science fiction and action adventure, we'd have elements of whimsy and fantasy.
Tell me the whole plan!
One day that'll work.
Doctor Who is a funny old thing. It's not just the TARDIS crew running up and down corridors. Now, sure, that is 90% of Doctor Who, but the format of the show allowed for much more than that. There's also running in quarries, running across fields, running through tunnels, running across bridges, running downstairs, running upstairs, and of course perambulating at an accelerated clip down a hallway.
Well, we've got comfy chairs, did I mention?
We have no need of comfy chairs.
I made him say comfy chairs.
Steven Moffat had worked as a teacher before moving to television writing. An early success was the late 80s, early 90s kids drama series Press Gang. Steven Moffat would move to comedy writing. His early 2000s success, Coupling, was sometimes written off as a more adult and British version of Friends, where it somehow managed to have even smugger characters. A long-time fan of Doctor Who, Steven Moffat wrote the 1999 charity special Curse of Fatal Death.
Time to roll out the secret weapon.
But it was later on when Steven Moffat wrote for the relaunched series where his scripts were often among the highlights of each year. He'd had his own dramatic success with the series Jekyll and had landed a deal to write scripts for Steven Spielberg's planned series of animated Tintin movies.
Cartoons.
In 2008, he'd be offered the chance to take over the reins of Doctor Who from Russell T Davies. He accepted the job, but wouldn't be ready until 2010, which would lead to Russell T Davies and David Tennant stretching out their time on the series with a number of specials to fill the gap between the 2008 and 2010 series. Doctor Who under Steven Moffat would at first try to be like Moffat's previous scripts for the show, dripping with invention and insane situations, spurious logic, but lots of cleverness, which is hard enough for 1 or 2 episodes a series, but here he would try to spread that magic over 13 episodes and a Christmas special. For this series at least, that plan more or less worked. Executive producer Steven Moffat was credited with writing 6 of the series' episodes, plus that year's Christmas special, which does sound like a hell of a workload alongside all the other showrunner stuff like supervising casting and editing and the like. And of course, Steven Moffat was at this point also developing another little project with Mark Gatiss which was set to launch the following year. This is a slice of bread. Here's a slice of bread with butter, here's a slice of bread with butter, and some very thinly spread jam. There is no linkage. There had been a brief moment where David Tennant may have been persuaded to stay on in the lead role. However, it would soon become apparent that Steven Moffat would need to look for a new Doctor on the quiet. Matt Smith had wanted to be a professional footballer, but an injury meant he would have to settle for a successful acting career. My old Uncle Jasper would often say that you should follow your passion and pursue your dreams to the end of the earth. But if that fails, just settle for some bullshit backup. Smith had been steadily increasing his profile as an actor, but wasn't yet a household name. He was 26 when he was cast as the Doctor, and when it was revealed he'd be the 11th Doctor, there was a chorus of shrugs. This announcement would also be more than a year before his first episodes as the 11th Doctor were broadcast. For context, Matt Smith was born in 1982, which only feels like, 20 years ago.
That's recent.
But really it's 30, 40. You bastard. Sorry, I'm just having an existential crisis about aging here. It's like getting a cornetto, dipping it in bronze, and then plunging it into your heart.
So for God's sake, however bored you get, stay out of...
Anyway, the 11th Doctor is... Well, I was going to go 5 minutes without describing the personality of a new Doctor as fast-talking and manic, but I literally couldn't. Smith's Doctor makes Tennant's fast-talking gabbler look like a turtle running in slow motion. This Doctor is innocent in the ways of the human heart, yet also incredibly old. He may be dressed like a hyper-hipster fashion victim, begging for you to take photographs of them as they read James Joyce while leaning on a lamppost outside of a library.
Bow ties are cool.
And this Doctor wants bow ties to happen. I don't for 1 minute wish to imply that wearing a bow tie makes you some sort of weirdo. It's not an implication.
That's extremely very not good.
Series 5 began with the 11th hour, where the TARDIS would crash into the front garden of a young girl, 7-year-old Amelia Pond, who's been left home alone and worried about a crack in her wall. But she also seems totally fine with some rando talking his way into her house and raiding the pantry. The new Doctor doesn't know who he is, but otherwise has most of his mental faculties.
Box falls out of the sky, man falls out of a box, man eats fish custard.
His taste in food, however, is shithouse. The TARDIS rebuilds itself and just needs a short adjustment. When the Doctor's back, he's captured by a young policewoman and chained to a radiator, though thankfully because this is a family series, she doesn't give him a hacksaw. The crack is actually a tear in the skin of the universe. But there's a more immediate threat to deal with. What is Prisoner Zero, and what's all this about incinerating? And also, what happened to little Amelia?
You're the little girl.
I'm Amelia, and you're late.
What happened?
12 years.
Meanwhile, at the local hospital, nurse Rory Williams is being chewed out because he insists coma patients are up and about, which, if you worked in a coma ward, that does actually sound like the ultimate goal for your patients. Of course, there is more to it than that. The Doctor borrows a laptop to crash a group chat of scientific heads, then bumps into Rory, who Amy introduces as a friend.
He was never real.
Phone now, gimme.
It was just a game. We were kids. You made me dress up as him.
And then, well, look, there's an alien using coma patients to give itself a suitable form to get around. But it's an imprisoned alien trying to escape, while its jailers are intent on burning the entire Earth. The Doctor manages to persuade the aliens that the Earth is in fact protected.
Basically, run.
Though that only happens after the Doctor has nicked somebody else's clothes from the hospital. Not seen, naked hipsters filing police reports, but either way, the Doctor is back. The TARDIS seems to have stabilised and the Doctor heads off on a short jaunt just to make sure everything's run in okay before he returns to Amy, 2 years later.
Are you from another planet?
Yeah.
Despite all the waiting, Amy decides to head off for a jaunt in the TARDIS, but only if he can be absolutely sure that they'll be back the next morning. The 11th hour is one of the most confident episodes of the series ever, with Steven Moffat's pent-up fanboying exploding in this tightly made script that's full of humour, whimsy, mystery, a hint of fantasy, a bit of science fiction.
Fish fingers and custard.
It serves as a brilliant introduction to Matt Smith and Karen Gillan, who would become one of the series' most iconic partnerships. We're not forgetting Rory, but at this stage he's mainly a third wheel. The 11th hour sets up the season's mystery, the crack in the skin of the universe. And also, Silence Must Fall. You know, these are story arcs that will span not just this series, but all of Matt Smith's era.
The universe is cracked. The Pandorica will open. Silence will fall.
The guest cast had Annette Crosby, Nina Wadia, Olivia Colman, Sir Patrick Moore, and little Caitlin Blackwood, Karen Gillan's cousin, playing the young Amelia Pond. Karen Gillan had appeared in Series 4 as the soothsayer of the Sibylline Sisterhood, and here the Scottish actress makes an immediate impact as the grown-up version of Amy Pond.
I heard you on the radio. You called for backup.
It's pretending. It's a pretend radio.
But you're a policewoman.
I'm a kissogram.
Amy Pond starts the series working as a kissogram, which apparently has just enough connotations for a level of lost innocence, but not too much lost innocence.
I thought you were a nurse.
I can be a nurse.
And at no point does she ever get cold sores that turn into alien invaders from the planet Zavirax. Amy was 7 when she'd met the Doctor. For years she would talk about the Raggedy Man in the box. She would draw the Doctor. She would make dolls of the Doctor and the TARDIS, though no one would believe her.
I kept fighting them.
Why?
They said you weren't real.
She'd grow into someone relatively flippant in the face of all the threats that she would encounter, both alien, non-alien, imaginary and non-imaginary.
It's not that you make people take risks, it's that you make them want to impress you.
Amy's boyfriend and later fiancé, Rory Williams, was a nurse in the local hospital, besotted with Amy in a way that she would find hard to reciprocate.
Is you stupid?
Oh, good, thanks.
Arthur Darvill took a character who was at first written as a bit of a wimp, but would eventually become as much of a companion as Amy.
Your girlfriend isn't more important than the whole universe.
She is to me!
The Beast Below would remind me that I would eventually watch Steven Moffat episodes in two minds. One mind is full of joy at the thrills, the wonders, the kookiness, the off-kilter plots, the imagery, sometimes very dark imagery that he would conjure up. And then the other mind is, that's a bit stupid. Beast Below is an interesting concept of Starship UK, but then there's the secret that's so terrible that people choose to wipe their memories. It's an episode full of impossible choices, but all of a sudden there's a simple, palatable choice that nobody's ever thought of. Okay, so the Doctor and Amy inside the mouth of a space whale covered in vomit, that's easy to relate to. We've all been there. We've all been vomited out of a space whale. Not just me.
I'm the bloody queen, mate. Basically, I rule.
We also have Sophie Okonedo as a cool British monarch, Liz 10, some kids who can actually act, those weird robots that don't actually turn out to be all that dangerous. But, when you add it all up, it's all right. I just feel that hanging every bit of drama on an unimaginative set of binary choices, like having characters have their hands tied in order to maintain the status quo, is just a contrivance that annoys me, like a scrub tick that's parasitically burrowed into my thigh. I call it Mr. Auger. As we mentioned earlier, Steven Moffat had created the series Coupling, so you could be forgiven if you didn't realise he had a lot of experience as a comedy writer.
Bees are evil. Bad beans.
Moffat can be very funny.
You're worse than my aunt.
I'm the Doctor. I'm worse than everybody's aunt. And that is not how I'm introducing myself.
Russell T Davies' comedy style was often a gossipy humour, slightly sarcastic and rooted in a way ordinary people spoke. Steven Moffat's characters were often there for elaborate constructed jokes.
It's a tongue.
A tongue.
A tongue. A great big tongue.
Steven Moffat characters often feel like sitcom characters who only exist in ways to set up elaborate jokes.
This isn't going to be big on dignity.
Sitcoms that rely on farce often have very rigid lanes in order to build up the joke, where, for example, something slightly embarrassing happens, which leads to more embarrassing things that compound the character's humiliation as it builds to a super embarrassing moment just before the end credits, which, in the case of Coupling, was usually somebody ending up naked in public. You might be thinking, why is this guy clowning on Coupling? Coupling is no laughing matter. I'm partly just using it as a convenient example of a sitcom using farce, but it's also an excuse to clown on Coupling.
Breasts.
Steven Moffat would use a lot of timey-wimey sci-fi style plot devices in his sitcom that was part relationship comedy, part farce, leading up to somebody's humiliation of being nude in public.
Yeah, well, maybe if you weren't such a Dalek.
Steven Moffat's method of constructing drama plots would take a similar path. Lots of characters being forced into certain lanes so that they head to one outcome for the script to wring all of the emotion out of the situation. I've said it before, it's not always a bad way to work. As in the case of this story, which is mostly alright, it's very irritating when you can hear the gears of the story mechanics grinding away like a rusting clock tower.
Potentially very dangerous. I think I'm going to need you.
Victory of the Daleks is not always loved, but I enjoy it a fair bit. Well, the first part of it at least. The Doctor has been summoned to the Cabinet War Rooms by Winston Churchill, but since the Doctor's taken a month to show up, the situation has changed. The war wasn't going well for Britain, but now they have a new secret weapon, Professor Bracewell's Ironsides.
I am your soldier.
What? No one believes the Doctor that the Daleks are dangerous aliens who should be destroyed. Until they get what they want, which is the Doctor something, and then on their spaceship the Doctor confronts them just as something has given the Daleks what they need to yada yada yada, the new Dalek paradigm.
Destroy the Daleks or save the Earth.
The Daleks turn on every light in London during an air raid, and lo and behold, some Spitfires show up in space to blow up a Dalek satellite. My main problem with the plot is that in the space of 10 minutes, Bracewell has developed and built the technology to send Spitfires into space. It's basically something that needed, 5 minutes of screen time to make work. For example, a poetic journey in Britain is to travel from Land's End to John O'Groats, basically travelling from one end of Britain to the other. Victory of the Daleks is that journey if it were a pub crawl. You made it, but things were getting a little blurry in Lancashire, and you blacked out completely at one point with no memory of Cumbria. A montage of Bracewell tinkering may not have been the most exciting thing, but it would have at least made the story seem a trifle less convenient. Oh, he was also a Dalek robot given human memories, and he's a giant backup bomb, where he's talked out of exploding by remembering the fake human memories. So, score 1 to drama, -1 for every kid who was inspired by this, grew up and would later join the bomb squad for a day. The end result seems to be a missed opportunity, since the whole Spitfires and space thing was the type of thing that Doctor Who could now do very well with its budget and the available technology. We do have the byplay between Churchill and the Doctor and Amy and Bracewell, which is all really nicely done. But there's also the new Daleks. So it is a great idea in theory, giving them a new look. And in some of the close-ups, they do look pretty great. Then you see profiles and realise they look like movie Daleks with osteoporosis. The Daleks had never really seen a massive redesign of the sort received by the Cybermen. The new series Daleks were bronze and they were slightly more tank-like, but they were basically the same as before. The new Dalek paradigm, or the parking lot of a Fiat dealership, or the Wiggles Daleks, or the United Carleds of Benetton, or whatever you want to call them, did not become the new standard of Dalek, where they would quickly be relegated to backgrounds before disappearing altogether. I guess, in the spirit of Steven Moffat, as long as we never say out loud,
"Those new Daleks aren't so bad,"
then they will never return. Again, parts of the design are really nice, but in general this is more than a swing and a miss. And in hindsight, which is very easy obviously, it does seem like a predictably doomed venture where there's only one painful outcome. A bit like jumping into a swimming pool but only seeing the water's been drained for repairs on the way down. The Doctor holding off the Daleks with a biscuit. That's the Doctor with front.
Alright, it's a jammy dodger, but I was promised tea.
Ian McNeice was in everything at one point or another, and he's one of those great character actors who literally exists to populate every series at some point. And why did it take so long for Bill Patterson to appear in Doctor Who? Susanna Fielding would later play Alan Partridge's co-host in This Time. So, despite the new Dalek paradigm and some of the plot skips, I mostly like this one for its ideas, if not for the totality of its execution. Though, looping back to an earlier suggestion about a montage, maybe that would have worked with the right song. I need a hero. I'm holding out for a hero till the end of the night. He's got to be strong, and he's got to be fast, and he's got to be fresh from the fight.
Doctor, what do you know of the Weeping Angel?
Time of the Angels and Flesh and Stone are a two-part story where things are upended again and again, and in fact literally upended. River Song and the Doctor was a partnership that was teased in her first appearance in Series 4, and now we get more overt hints, clues and teasers that have the subtlety of jumping off the moving southbound train, timing it really badly and being hit by the northbound train. River Song is an archaeologist. In fiction, we're generally presented with two types of archaeologist. That's that fusty fuddy-duddy who poo-poos everything and belongs in a museum, and the other sort, the grave robbers, who also belong in a museum but ideally at night after closing time. River, of course, is the latter type, and she's on a mission working with Father Octavian and his squad of clerics. Working with is a nice way of saying that she's actually working off her prison sentence in order to possibly qualify for a pardon.
Father Octavian, sir. Bishop, second class. 20 clerics at my command. The troops are already in the dropship and landing shortly.
The crashed spaceship Byzantium turns out to have been carrying a weeping angel, and we'll eventually see evidence of what they thought were local statues that are actually decayed angels who are being regenerated from the radiation released by the crash. Then we have 2 episodes of wandering around forests and some really nice caves. I mean, they're really top-notch caves. None of those scrunched up tinfoil walls here. Really primo quality caves. This looks like $1 million if you spent that money by buying a mountain.
How?
I'll do a thing.
What thing?
I don't know, it's a thing in progress. Respect the thing. Moving out!
Amy's been infected by an angel because, yes, I see Steven Moffat has changed the rules of how angels work. Okay.
But I died afraid, in pain and alone. You made me trust you, and when it mattered, you let me down.
Oh, and the dead grunts are being cruelly used to taunt the Doctor and company. Here's a story with logic that sort of works within the story, and only in this story. And as a 2-part story, it does push how much the audience will buy in one hit. It sort of mostly works. Amy's turning to stone, the Doctor turns the gravity on and off, the crack in the universe also plays a part. The angels want to save themselves by having the Doctor throw himself into the crack.
Professor Rivers.
I'm going to be a professor someday, am I?
Alex Kingston showing up in Doctor Who is like inviting a family friend to stay in your guest room for the weekend, and then on Monday you find out they've had the place redecorated. It's hard to imagine the Matt Smith era without River Song. The Doctor had somebody who's a rival, but also someone very important to him in the future, but he has no idea why. River and the Doctor meet each other in the wrong order.
It's not supposed to make that noise. You leave the brakes on.
Ian Glenn's obviously practicing for a super well-spoken character who would make heroic sacrifices.
I beg to differ, sir.
After returning home, Amy decides she wants to have a fling with the Doctor before her wedding.
To me, I am 907 years old. Do you understand what that means?
It's been a while.
And, watching the 11th Doctor's extreme discomfort is glorious. How he fixes the problem is novel, to say the least. The story Blink set up the Weeping Angels as dangerous creatures who were almost impossible to beat, but they were beaten. Dramatically speaking, you can't keep beating your foes in the same way again and again. But here, rather than focus purely on how to beat them in a different way, Steven Moffat tinkered with how they worked. So now Amy's infected by an angel after seeing a recording of one. Rather than sending people back in time, they're also snapping people's necks like pretzels. And not soft pretzels, the hard kind. Though on reflection, if your neck has been snapped, you're not too fast on the type of pretzel. The rest of the episode leads up to the Doctor beating the angels by manipulating the ship's gravity to have the angels fall into the crack. I mean, that sounds far more exciting than the alternative, the Doctor finding a hammer and a chisel. Maybe one day we'll meet the Weeping Angels' greatest foe, an angry stonemason who's going to turn them all into kitchen countertops.
That's a fairy tale.
Doctor. Aren't we all?
In the end, 2 good episodes with a lot of invention and plot twists, some scares, and most of it is explained well enough at the time, though some of it will have to wait till the end of the series to make complete sense, if it ever does. Despite the name Vampires of Venice, the story isn't actually about actual vampires. That can seem a bit like a bait and switch. Also, I was shocked to learn that venison does not come from Venice.
Makes you wonder what could be so bad it doesn't actually mind us thinking it's a vampire.
Vampires of Venice, of course, does not refer to local tour operators or hoteliers, but an adventure where the Doctor, Amy, and now Rory travel back to 16th century Venice and become involved with Helen McCrory's School for Girls that is turning the students into fishwives. Sort of. So the Doctor had ruined Rory's Bucks night, and to make it up, took the couple on a romantic holiday to Venice. And pretty soon we learn that it's fishy aliens looking to repopulate, where they are also looking to redefine the term seafood. It's an okay story. There's a lot of running around for the dramatic stuff and a lot of really great gags regarding the TARDIS triangle of Amy, Rory and the Doctor. All that's missing are the awkward anime grunts. There's Rory's inferiority complex, there's the Doctor trying to make amends, and Amy trying to paper over the cracks in her relationship with Rory, where of course she kissed the Doctor, but of course look at all this cool stuff in the TARDIS. Rory finds his feet in the TARDIS pretty quickly. He's not so bad on the technical stuff, but a high level of culture shock is unavoidable when the scampi from space have developed a taste for human flesh. The locations in Croatia add a sense of scale to the episode, perhaps giving it more impact than the story called for. Also, the show's Croatian location offered actualization away from the show's home station, so that's no insinuation that the depiction of the Venetian town in a Croatian location is in any way a rejection of the qualifications of the filmmakers in the Welsh nation.
She's got 10,000 children swimming around the canals waiting for Mum to make them some compatible girlfriends.
Amy's Choice is a great episode, with the TARDIS crew flipping between 2 realities and not knowing which one is real. Is the story of them being stuck in a powerless TARDIS what's really happening, or is the Doctor's visit to a married Amy and Rory a few years down the track real?
Are you pregnant?
Or is all of this a shared hallucination? And then this fella shows up.
If you're the Time Lord, let's call me the Dream Lord.
What's real, what's not real? We all have to deal with this. For example, are badgers real? I mean, people talk about badgers as if they are real. I've only ever seen a badger once and at night. Other things I only see at night, vampires and night watchmen. So I guess my ultimate nightmare is a vampire badger with a thermos.
One is real, the other's fake. And just to make it more interesting, you're going to face, in both worlds, a deadly danger.
The crew in the powerless TARDIS look like they are doomed to freeze to death, while in Amy and Rory's idyllic future, things turn to shit faster than a bucket of KFC washed down with castor oil. The oldies are killing everyone, turning them to sand, which is a bit like a video chat with Uncle Dennis when he starts rabbiting on about the good old days, and then I turn to sand. It later transpired he was actually talking about a television variety show that he worked on as a dancer in the 1970s. The Dream Lord taunts the TARDIS crew by implying Amy hasn't decided who she fancies more, the Doctor or Rory, and then would heckle them relentlessly. At this point you might think I would drop in an anecdote about my office nemesis Alex Smelly. But no, Amy's choice is a really solid story, probably one of the better ones this season. Though, to date we've not had Toby Jones back as the Dream Lord or as any other character. The end of the story reveals that he too was a figment of the imagination.
Ask me what happens if you die in reality.
What happens?
You die, stupid. That's why it's called reality.
But really, he was too good a character and a guest star to have never reused them. I mean, we've had weirder things hand-waved, like I left my wallet at a restaurant. When I went back to look for it, the maitre d' just hand-waved me away saying there was no wallet, and that he had to go because he was late for his last-minute flight to the Maldives.
Amy's men. Amy's choice.
The Hungry Earth and Cold Blood form a two-part story where the Doctor goes to Wales, but this time, rather than having to double for London or Scotland or wherever, this time Wales gets to play Wales, which of course is where Doctor Who has been filmed since it came back. A mining operation drilling down deep into the Earth reaches 21 kilometres, which is about the same length as the traffic jam caused when my great-uncle Stan's truck ran out of petrol on the motorway at peak hour, which was A, a shame, B, inconvenient for other motorists, and C, funny because he was driving a petrol tanker at the time. But of course this is Doctor Who and one of the technicians is sucked into the ground. Coincidentally, his is the only family nearby, but I'm sure that's just a lucky happenstance that will in no way become relevant later in the story. The Doctor, Amy and Rory land. They see echoes of themselves since they're 10 years in their own future, but closer to hand the Doctor realises the drilling is perhaps not going to end well. Amy is also sucked into the ground where she finds the technician, and he's been the subject of experiments by whatever is down there. Badgers. I said to Marge, I bet it's badgers. Spoilers, it's not badgers. But oh look, an underground reptilian colony of creatures who may or may not be a type of Silurian and not badgers. I checked twice. Part 2 has one Silurian warrior being killed by an overprotective mum, and the Doctor gets the humans to negotiate with the Silurian elder Eldane. However, the sister of the slain warrior has other ideas.
It only ends with our victory!
Having sort of averted a war with the Silurians with the promise of, try again in 1,000 years, the story ends with Amy's crack.
Oh yeah!
I mean, the crack that we first saw on the wall of Amy's house. The Doctor puts his hand in the crack. That's the one in the skin of the universe, not the, But Rory is shot by a dying Silurian. And, well, for reasons, Amy, of course, will forget Rory existed. I mean, they aren't exactly satisfying reasons, but whatever. The crack also leaves the Doctor a clue, a fragment of the TARDIS outer shell, which of course does not bode well for several reasons, but mainly because the Doctor only has third-party coverage. These two stories are okay, they are nothing special, where the most interesting aspects are the Silurians finally getting a makeup look that allows the actors underneath to show some form of expression. I've always liked the masks for the Silurians, but getting them to show much expression was, like 5 large pizzas for Bigfoot, a tall order. We're getting a new offshoot of Silurians for the reboot series, not supplanting the original series versions, but reintroducing them to a contemporary audience. The new offshoot Silurian part works well enough, the humans being numpties works well enough, the guest cast was good, but it's also a little familiar in that it's going over ground we've seen before with previous Silurian stories. Just here we've got better makeup and a bigger budget. Parts of the story feel like retreads of the older Silurian stories, and there's also riffing on the 80s story Frontios. Mira Sial was the second Goodness Gracious Me cast member in Who this season. Stephen Moore as the Elder was in everything at one point or another, but for us here, he was the voice of Marvin the paranoid android in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Niamh McIntosh played 2 Silurian sisters here and would go on to play a 3rd lizard lady later on in the Moffat era when she appeared a few times as Madame Vastra.
I thought you might like, possibly to perhaps paint them or something. Might be a thought.
Yes, well, they're not my favourite flower.
Vincent and the Doctor is a story that probably shouldn't work as a Doctor Who episode, but damn if it ain't one of the best. There's no world-shattering threat, just a lost alien and an artist racked by internal torment. The Vincent of the title is the painter Vincent van Gogh. Or is that Van Gogh?
Van Gogh.
Or Van Gogh. Actually, I've said Van Gogh ever since a courier delivering a parcel forgot to put his handbrake on and the delivery van went down the hill. Tried to warn them by saying, hey, look at that Van Gogh. And until they heard the crash, they just thought I was an art snob. Irony of ironies, the runaway van destroyed the art gallery at the bottom of the hill. But all they had was an exhibit of John Baldessari's work from the early 1960s. The Doctor and the now Rory-less Amy see a Van Gogh painting with a monster in it and they investigate. Of course, Van Gogh happens to be Amy's favourite painter. Incidentally, my favourite painter, H.F. Johnson & Sons. Their work is top-notch and they don't charge extra for wainscoting. Van Gogh is a tragic figure afflicted by crippling depression, but he's also seeing an invisible creature. Richard Curtis of Blackadder and, yes, Love Actually fame wanted to write a Doctor Who story and gave us this touching tale.
But you're not armed.
What with? Overconfidence, this, and a small screwdriver. I'm absolutely sorted.
While the monster part is the least successful part of the episode, it's the interaction between the Doctor and Amy on the one hand, and Tony Curran as Vincent in a fantastic performance as the tortured artist. Bill Nye popping up as a tour guide in the art gallery,
Van Gogh.
and making us feel like idiots is just the cherry on top.
Nice bow tie. Bow ties are cool.
Yours is very...
Oh, thank you.
Also, no. Vincent and the Doctor was also filmed in Croatia. The production value of the story is fantastic. It looks more like 19th century France than anything you could have knocked up back in Wales.
Michelangelo painting the Sistine Chapel. Wow. What a whinger.
The story is touching, sad, inspiring, and just showed the breadth of the type of story you could tell with Doctor Who.
Come on, we better get you home.
Where are you staying tonight?
Oh, you're very kind.
The Lodger is a slight episode. It's more comedy focused. It's relatively enjoyable since the humour mostly lands.
How very convenient.
The Doctor is separated from his wayward TARDIS with Amy still inside it, so he ends up becoming James Corden's roommate. I mean, not literally James Corden's roommate, since this is not a horror movie, but the roommate of the character played by James Corden, who at this stage was less the widely disliked host of an American late-night talk show, and still cuddly curmudgeon Smiffy from the British sitcom Gavin and Stacey, which of course Corden co-created and co-wrote with Ruth Jones. Craig's a lovable schlub who works in a call centre and has a thing for his friend Sophie, but can't get up the nerve to get out of the friend zone. And of course the upstairs tenant is a stranger and random people are going missing. That bit's okay, but what you really want to see is Matt Smith's Doctor turn Craig's life upside down, whether it's in his football team, showing up at Craig's office, or poking his nose into Craig and Sophie's relationship, where they need to work out what they want.
Where's the on switch for this?
And of course, somehow Craig getting to admit his feelings is a way to resolve the science fiction part of the plot. Don't send in angry letters to the BBC just yet. But maybe Unit could throw a cordon around Corden.
What did you say?
Matt Smith doesn't get enough recognition for his comedic chops, where here he's playing a childlike and gormless adult, or a very old man in a young man's body, all in the same scene.
I return to my command after 1 week and discover we've been playing host to Cleopatra, who's in Egypt and dead.
The Pandorica opens is a taster for the rest of the Matt Smith era, where everything is thrown at the screen. We begin with several of the guest characters this season, setting up a mystery with little vignettes featuring Vincent, Les 10, Churchill and Riversong, all working to get a message to the Doctor. Vincent's painted the TARDIS exploding. The Doctor and Amy follow River's message to ancient Britain during the Roman invasion.
Hello, sweetie.
There are thousands of ships heading for Earth, and River's in the TARDIS discovering that Amy's room has more clues, and yes, we are throwing everything at you by this stage. One of the Romans happens to be Rory, who died and suddenly became a Roman. The Pandorica is a legend about a container designed to keep the most fearsome thing in the universe, which apparently is not people with creepy smiles knocking on your front door. The Doctor makes a grand speech telling the aliens that they can't have the Pandorica. It's big stuff, hyperbolic. But the twist is that the Daleks, the Cybermen, the Sontarans, the Jadoons, Silurians and whoever have all banded together to put the Doctor in the Pandorica because he's going to destroy the universe. They've done all this by manipulating Amy's life.
There are cracks in time. I've seen them everywhere and they're getting wider. The TARDIS exploding is what causes them, but we can stop the cracks ever happening if you just land her.
There's another twist. The Romans are Autons, which means Rory is somehow also an Auton, who unfortunately kills Amy. So this is an episode that has everything but the kitchen sink, but I must admit that I've not seen all of the deleted scenes, so I cannot confirm whether the kitchen sink was set to make an uncredited cameo. It's also a ton of fun because it is so unpredictable. Can the final episode just wrap this up in a satisfying way? I mean, can it? Please, can it? After all the hype, the Big Bang brings things down to earth a little bit, with a caper in a museum.
Ah, two of you. Complicated.
Rory is still an Auton who's been guarding Amy for 2,000 years, but he's still Rory.
What in the name of sanity have you got on your head?
It's a fez. I wear a fez now. Fezzes are cool.
Here we are in a series full of lots of things that aren't adequately explained, followed by more things that don't make sense, much like the Invisible Man's career as a nude life model. Basically, the Big Bang starts off as a fun romp with the Doctor bouncing forward and backwards in time, setting up his rescue from the Pandorica, putting a dead Amy in there to restore her to life, and then 2,000 years later, the Doctor has a wacky idea.
Reboot the universe.
Mixing an exploding TARDIS with the Pandorica.
For what?
Big Bang 2.
To somehow restore the universe.
All memory of him will be purged from the universe. He will never have been born.
Goodbye, Doctor.
Of course, that doesn't bode well for continuing the series, and so Amy retains some idea of the Doctor before she makes a big speech at her wedding.
Raggedy man, I remember you, and you are late for my wedding!
Which, lo and behold, brings the Doctor to her. So after all of that, the season ends with some primo hand waving, and we're not just talking about a bus full of kids waving at truck drivers, we're talking about an army of synchronised spokesmodels at a car show. So if you've watched the episode, you've seen how it looks, but of course, it is possible this is what was in the script. It's a cute ending, but it does feel like a shortcut to avoid writing any sort of clever resolution, a satisfying twist, or anything dramatically interesting. With the universe rebooted, Rory's no longer an Auton, and Amy's parents are alive. So that crack in the skin of the universe was a big explosion linked back to the day of Amy's wedding, which, when I think more about it, does seem like an overly complicated way to save money on postage for save the date cards. All of the aliens here have banded together and manipulated Amy's existence just to lure the Doctor to the point where they could pop him into the Pandorica. So yes, they popped a Doc in it. Does that work? Yes, if you allow yourself to be sucked into Steven Moffat's web of fun. Or no, if you're the sort of person who believes Kramer versus Kramer would have worked much better if Dustin Hoffman and Meryl Streep's characters had settled their dispute in the boxing ring. My money would have been on Streep, she's got a longer reach. We still have Silence Must Fall as something that must be important, judging by the number of times it was randomly thrown into the dialogue this year. But guess what? The crack isn't done, it would pop up again. Because, why not?
Do you know, in 900 years of time and space, I've never met anyone who wasn't important before.
There was one more confection that we're covering as part of this run, the 2010 Christmas special, A Christmas Carol. Spoilers, there's nobody called Carol in this.
Merry Christmas!
Doctor!
So it's taken Doctor Who all of this time to do A Christmas Carol, and here Steven Moffat goes all in on whimsy. It's not remotely science fiction, it's more of a tragic fantasy romance that's heartbreaking yet uplifting.
Fish that can swim in fog.
With singer Catherine Jenkins melting the heart of future Scrooge stand-in Kazran Sardik.
From Earth, sir, registering over 4,000 life forms on board.
Not if we wait a bit.
Sardik is such a dick. He'll stand by and watch a disaster happen because, if he's a miserable git, then why the hell shouldn't everyone else be a miserable git? I think I've seen Sardik in the comments a few times.
And what are you wearing? That doesn't matter. Are you from the honeymoon suite? Oh, shut up.
Amy and Rory are on their honeymoon on a spaceship that's going to crash into the planet below, but saying this out loud sounds awfully convoluted. But anyway, to save the ship, the Doctor needs to use a machine that only responds to Sardik, but he's not budging, so the Doctor uses what little time he has left to rewrite history by meeting the younger Sardik, making him fall in love with the woman, who, for reasons, only has a set number of days to live. They will spend Christmas Eve together for years, but as time goes by, he gets to be an old and unpleasant shit. She's only got one day left, and he doesn't care about a crashing ship because, instead of spreading the joy, Sardik will spread the misery. The clarion call of all miserable fuckheads.
I'm a ghost of Christmas past.
So in the end, we're given a story calculated to give characters only unpleasant choices, but also something to give the audience maximum feels. Well, for anyone who isn't themselves a Sardik.
Merry Christmas, Kazran Sardik.
Sure, it's not science fiction. It burrows into the realms of high fantasy, taking liberally from Charles Dickens and ending with something that is almost pure sugar. I mean, it's perfect for Christmas night audiences. Michael Gambon was a sort of actor who you would never have expected to appear in Doctor Who. So having him appear in something so crowd-pleasing shows the power of where the series was at this time.
That's good. Yeah, that means it's over.
Murray Gold's music this season is grandiose, and that's the best word to describe it, using a live orchestra for much of the music. Gold had given each Doctor a musical motif, but for Matt Smith, he pulled out all the stops, where he created one of the show's second most recognisable pieces of music that's associated with Doctor Who.
No, hang on.
Whereas themes for earlier Doctors were Murray Gold's way of telling you it's the Doctor without using Ron Grainer's theme tune, I Am the Doctor would become an anthem for the 11th Doctor. I mean, you don't have to stand up and sing along while it's playing, but I do. Like any series, this was a year with a lot of familiar faces. And of course there's the ones that we haven't pointed out yet. Several actors later known for shows like Game of Thrones and Umbrella Academy among others. There are others that we haven't talked about, but who's got time to go through the cast list of EastEnders? Doctor Who was now being made in high definition, though some British curmudgeons would prefer you don't say high definition as it sounds like an Americanism, which they don't like. They'd instead prefer you use something more British sounding. So depending on your region, there's Watcher definition or Art definition, and in the home counties, how do you do definition. So not so much high definition, more like higher definition. It's not just ticking a box that says 1080. The lighting and camera work this season just looks more like a film. It's more epic, cinematic even. When it works, it really works. When it doesn't, it still mostly works. The CG effects have held up relatively well most of the time. Series 5 looks almost like a different series to the David Tennant era, even though it's got mostly the same production crew. If the series had any sort of recession-era budget cut, it rarely shows on screen, except maybe for the Dalek spaceship being shot inside a giant cake tin. There's a new TARDIS interior with an equally wacky console. The exterior's also been given a makeover. And most importantly, the 11th Doctor has a new Sonic of his own.
Oh, a new one!
Lovely. By this time, merchandise for the new series had built up ahead of steam, though unfortunately, the new Dalek paradigm designs would blight the range for years to come.
Well, maybe we're going to eat it, but I don't like the option.
Also, while I'm at it, I'm just patting myself on the back for not having mentioned coupling in a while. Ah, shit.
You won't admit you love me, and so how am I ever to know? You always tell me, perhaps.
The Steven Moffat era had gotten off to a flying start, reorienting the series with elements of fantasy, fairy tales, and an entirely new level of off-the-wall wackiness.
You know how sometimes I have really brilliant ideas? Sorry.
Series 5 is a solid year of Doctor Who, a really consistent year of Doctor Who stories. Even at its lowest point, never manages to produce what's technically termed a stinker.
What could possibly go wrong?
Have you seen you?
So you're just going to be snide, no helpful hints?
The 11th Hour was a brilliant realignment of the series, introducing a new Doctor and companion with such panache that it's going to be hard to ever top it as the best first story for a new Doctor. The Beast below has some interesting ideas that get bogged down in histrionic decisions that lack imagination. Victory of the Daleks was a fun little diversion that seems to skip some stuff that would have made the ending just a little bit more satisfying, but on the whole is a fun idea that's 3/4 of the way to being pretty good. Time of the Angels and Flesh and Stone rewrites how Angel works, or at least give them a new power. These episodes also let us see River Song and the 11th Doctor interact for the first time, where they're hinting and teasing and spoiler warning all over the place.
You, me, handcuffs. Must it always end this way?
Vampires of Venice was okay, some nice imagery, but it's just okay. Amy's Choice was a brilliant take on trying to decide which reality was real, like flicking between Survivor and Amazing Race and then turning off the telly at the end. Hungry Earth and Cold Blood brings back the Silurians, but the stories are relatively ordinary. Vincent and the Doctor is one of the finest stories of the series ever, despite its relatively low stakes. The Lodger is a bit of fluff, starring James Corden, who's a bit of fluff. The Pandorica Opens and The Big Bang were a really good pair of episodes full of, well, everything, and they're only let down by a slightly convenient ending. A Christmas Carol is an hour of tears, laughter, and sugar rush.
Who the man?
I'm never saying that again.
All in all, this is one of the most consistent runs of Doctor Who ever. Even the episodes I liked least are relatively enjoyable and watchable. Series 5 was a success in most metrics, whether it be with reviewers, the audiences at home, sales figures at Birdseye and Ambrosia, and emergency room admissions for people wearing bow ties having their stomachs pumped after trying to live on the Doctor's diet. The new pairing of the Doctor, Amy and Rory works really well, so the temptation was to try and go even bigger with the 6th series. That's a good series, but our review will have a lot of howevers. If you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos.